So I thought I'd go ahead and make a video on a collection of the best dual motor e-bikes in the market as of mid 2024. Because the dual motor space has really been blossoming lately. I remember just a couple of years ago, the Grizzly was essentially the only bike with dual motors, and it was kind of like a novelty thing. But things have changed. Dual motors and just generally speaking, bikes with more features are becoming more common. And here are my top 5 favorite kind of next gen bikes that all feature dual hub motors, as well as some other pretty cool features. Well, a second motor up front takes some of the load off of the rear motor, obviously, leading to better acceleration, usually a slight boost in top end speed, so the overall performance should be better with a second motor. The main downside is the extra power consumption and the resulting reduced range. Obviously, if you add a second 1000 watt motor, it's going to consume more power. You will travel faster and have a more enjoyable experience, but traveling faster just requires more power, even though it reduces travel time. So when shopping for dual motor bikes, you should also therefore look for larger overall battery capacity. So here's my list of the top 5 bikes you can buy right now in 2024. First point I want to make here is that dual motor bikes do not have to be super expensive. Case in point, the first bike on this list is budget. It's $1,400 and you can buy it off of Amazon. Here we get dual 1000 watt hub motors, making the bike significantly faster and more responsive than if it just had one single 1000 watt motor in the back. Now when it comes to the battery, it is not as large as the others on this list, given the restricted price point here, although it still is a little bit above the norm for single motor bikes. So it's 48 volts, 23 amp hours. So if you're on an extreme budget and you still want dual motors and all the benefits they bring, this is a great option, although it's certainly not anywhere close to the best you can buy or even the best value in my opinion. So let's jump to something at a slightly higher price point to see what exactly changes. And I want to begin with the eCells Dual Star. This is a version of the popular 5-star from eCells that delivers dual motors. The cost here is $2,500, and we get meaningful upgrades for that price. And one of the biggest is the battery. So we go from a 48 volt found in the Filoto to a 60 volt pack here. Higher voltage further increases the power, acceleration, responsiveness of the overall vehicle. So dual motors combined with high voltage is a pretty potent combination. And the capacity of this battery is 20 amp hours. To get the total watt hour capacity, you multiply the volts times amps, and that gives us a capacity of 1,200 watt hours. So if you're doing throttle only, that should give you a minimum range of roughly 20 miles. But to my surprise, I noticed that you can actually spec out this bike to have dual batteries. The second battery is a little bit smaller at 15 amp hours, but that brings the overall watt hour capacity up to 2,100 watt hours. The motors themselves are from Hentak, they're Hentak hub motors, and from my experience, these are larger and provide more torque than Bafang hub motors. Now, aside from the power system, the design here is pretty minimal and sleek in my opinion. It is a step-through design, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I think it really works with the aesthetics here, and it still manages to deliver effective front and rear suspension. We have a legit D&M monoshock in the rear with a mountain bike style swing arm and an air fork up front with 120 millimeters of travel. So I really like what I see with this bike. We get all these next gen features that are becoming more popular, such as dual motors, even dual batteries, high voltage, suspension, all for a reasonable price. The only thing I don't like about this bike is the gigantic wheels. These are the 26 by 4 inch wide fat tires, and they make the overall footprint, the standover height, a little silly in my opinion. And that's why this next bike is essentially a smaller version of this Dual Star. I know it looks drastically different, but it's surprisingly similar on the spec sheet to the Dual Star, just with a smaller, more compact body. The most unique similarity here is the battery. So stock, this rocks the exact same 60 volt, 20 amp hour pack with the option for dual battery packs, the second one being 15 amp hours. So just like before, that's a theoretical maximum watt-hour capacity of 2,100. Of course, we have dual hub motors here, but the wheels themselves are different. So they're much smaller, 20 by 4 inches wide, and we have a mag wheel instead of spokes, which require a bit less maintenance, they're more durable, and they are my preferred choice. The geometry of the bike is a little bit different as well. We still have a rear linkage that ultimately gives you the same leverage and effective rear suspension. So overall, I'm a big fan of this bike, potentially more so than the Dual Star, just for the compact nature of this. But there is one negative, and that's the price. This is substantially more expensive at $3,500. Although luckily, right now there is a pre-order sale going on, and it reduces the price to $2,900. Now for that price, $2,900, you could opt for this bike instead. Anioki A8, and this is another great dual motor bike that brings with it a different set of pros and cons. So the hub motors here on paper are more powerful than the previous version at 1600 watts in the front and 1900 watts in the rear, but the voltage is a little bit less at 52 volts versus the 60 of the previous two. That's a little bit disappointing, but I can see why they made this choice because the capacity is absolutely massive. It comes in at 60 amp hours. That's a total watt-hour capacity, when you multiply the volts times amps, of 3,120. That's over 1,000 watt-hours more than the previous two bikes, even in their dual battery configuration. Yeah, so even though this isn't going to have the same amount of performance as the previous two bikes, the range here is going to be absolutely killer. But this bike will be slower than the previous two because the huge battery adds a lot of weight and the voltage is less. But the dual motors do help to offset these drawbacks by adding more power, increasing the acceleration, and that's why when they recently upgraded this bike to include dual motors, I think it really helped to level up this bike. But aside from the battery, we do have some unique parts here, such as the seat. You can see it's kind of a mix between like a bike saddle and a motorcycle bench. The brake rotors are absolutely huge, and the bike itself is full suspension. Finally, to close out this list, we have the Walkie H9, and this represents, according to me, the best value dual motor e-bike. The combined power is 1,750 watts. We have full suspension. The bike itself is a folding design, if that's important to you. We have my preferred mag wheels, and above all else, we have a huge battery at an affordable price point. So there's actually two versions with different capacity batteries here. The cheaper one is $1,500 currently on Amazon, and it delivers a 48 volt, 40 amp hour battery pack. And if you want, you can buy the more expensive version at $1,700 with a 60 amp hour battery pack at the same 48 volts. As we touched on, I'm always a fan of higher voltage batteries, but considering the budget price here, I can see why they opted to keep the voltage relatively low in exchange for a higher amp hour capacity. I mean, this kind of range for $1,500 is insane. And the fact that this bike also has dual hub motors is just icing on the cake in my opinion. So according to me, in mid-2024, these are the top 5 dual motor bikes in the market. I'll go ahead and leave a link to these bikes below the video. If I missed a bike that you guys think deserves to be on this list, let us know in the comments. If you guys enjoyed the video, I appreciate a like before you go, subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next one.